We're finding out how susceptible humanity is to propaganda in ways that I don't think we could have fathomed. There's a story of like Russian people coming over here and going like, oh yeah, like your propaganda is so much better in America than in Russia.
Yeah.
And the guy goes like, oh, well, wait a minute, Russia's famous for propaganda. It's like, yeah, the difference is in Russia, we all know it's propaganda.
Wow. I wrote a piece titled The Apotheosis of Martin Scorsese, where I deal with this whole issue of how he does glorify violence, but I don't want to talk about that
well,
now.
I know, but like it's an interesting take on human nature because I'm like watching this and going like, is this human nature where just there is no moral compass at all? And it's interesting with when you frame it with Christianity because it's like, you know, this does give us a moral framework. That's part of what Christianity is meant to do. And without that, where's the limitation of evil? And we're living in this time where we're seeing evil run amok.
Okay, this is where I want to go with you. First of all, the scripture says, whatsoever things are good, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are noble, whatsoever think on these things. God is telling us, like, yeah, there's evil, but focus on the beautiful and the good and the true. It doesn't mean you don't ever see the evil, whatever, but God calls us to be careful what we take in. But I want to talk, when you talk about evil, okay, what happened with the pandemic, a lot of people woke up and said, what is going on? I feel this authoritarian thing, this pressure. It feels like evil. They're telling me I got to get this vaccine. It's not even a vaccine. It's made with aborted babies. I got and everybody's telling me, including my pastor and Christian leaders, I got to get this, whatever. So it was a real difficult moment for a lot of people. And I want to talk about this because what really got to me when I discovered you and I'm like, you know, looking you up and when it says that you pretty quickly saw the COVID-19 vaccine as a bad thing. And that took real courage at that time. Because as soon as I started saying stuff about it, I got blowback from people that I thought were friends. They were like, stop spreading disinformation.
I got attacked. My fan base was primarily on the left, as it turns out, and the attack was relentless because also, and this isn't to brag, but I was very early on.
Yes,
speaking
you were.
out.
That's right.
I like Joe Rogan was still like a year from speaking out, basically, even like hinting that ivermectin might be a good idea. But I mean, to me, it was a ticker tape parade of red flags. They were demonizing things like ivermectin. They were even demonizing things like vitamin C. So it just became obvious that there's something, like you would have to have turned your brain off to not notice that there was something funny going on. And then once they wanted kids to get it, and you know it's an experiment with no long-term safety test in place, that just makes no sense on the face of it. And that is when I first started speaking out. And I said, wait, kids shouldn't get this. And I thought, oh, most people are going to agree with that. That's reasonable. And it was not, it was the opposite of that. It was like a full-scale meltdown. How dare you? You want to kill people. What are you? Who are you? I thought you were something else.
Yeah.
It was like that.
Yeah, I got a bunch of that for other stuff. And it's hard to process because you're thinking, wait a second, we live in America. It's a free country. I'm expressing what I think is true.
Yeah.
And you're telling me, shut up, you can't say that. And that's where you say, wait a minute. Like, what do you mean I can't say that?
Yeah, well, I had people write me privately, like, mentors, people that I've known and worked with for a long time wrote me in private too and would say, you need to stop speaking out. And it's weird, on some level, they might have just been concerned for me to be able to maintain a career. Yeah, so I don't hate them, but the more pushback I got, and I don't know if this was ego or Jesus, but the more pushback I got, the more I wanted to speak out. It did not make me want to like hide. It provoked the opposite reaction. I went a little ham at that point.
Ham?
Like I went nuts. I started.
I don't know. I'm not familiar with that term.
I don't even know. It means you go wacky with it. You start speaking out more. I couldn't. I was posting more and more and more and more. And at that point too, there was no informed consent. So I was actually trying to alert people because I had been doing lots of research. You know, so I knew certain things that, that I didn't think the public knew. So I was concerned with that. Like,
You actually cared about people.
I did, and now
Strangers.
and now there's people that still speak out a lot, and I'm a little bit less inspired to, because I feel like the information is out there,
Right.
and people don't want to have their minds changed if they think a certain way. I think a lot of times.
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, the more information that comes out, this is just one controversial topic, but it's a huge one. But honestly, it's the way people basically said, "Shut up! Don't say that. You can't say that." You thought, what world am I living in?
It was weird.
And who are you to dare even tell me what I can and cannot say? Patriots have died so we can speak truth in America.
Freedom
We
of
have free speech. And it just so happens what we're saying is helpful.
Freedom of speech became controversial.
Yeah.
And just like now, even singing a song like Give Peace a Chance seems to be a controversial thing to do.
Folks, I hate to interrupt, but I just don't want you to miss any of the content we're putting out on here. We've just got some amazing stuff. So would you do yourself a favor and hit the subscribe button so we can make sure you don't miss anything? I promise you, great stuff coming up. Hit the subscribe button. Thank you. One of the things that intrigued me was I realized, when the Nazis, the thought police, shut you down,
right?
You were really and are, you're well known, especially in the music world. You've worked with like everybody. I mean, Peter Gabriel championed you early on, like
early,
25 plus years ago.
Yeah.
Peter Gabriel, and
I was good friends with Lou Reed.
you know what?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, like he was my brother, I loved him a lot, yeah.
And you obviously lived on
New
the
York.
Lower East Side.
Yeah. We would hang out every day.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then, for a time, not every day of his life.
Yeah,
but there was a period there, but I've been in bands with Jeff Ament from Pearl Jam, like you mentioned, Danny Harrison and Ben Harper, also Peter Buck and I have a band, Arthur Buck, and But the thing is, like, me speaking outside of the narrative, that would frighten most people in the music business, because you're not. It's so strange because I don't care what other people think to the degree that I could possibly have an emotional reaction from it. It just doesn't strike me that way. So I don't understand that in other people. I could disagree with you, but it wouldn't make me like say, okay, I no longer want to go bowling with you because you think something different. You know what I mean? Like you could tell me I love Biden and I'd be like, okay, I think you're not seeing things clearly, but that would just be my opinion, and who cares?
Well,
like we can still be friends.
Seems like you're a big-hearted person, and I think that's those of us who would say we're Christians or whatever, we're supposed to be big-hearted and open and understand that there are going to be people that are going to disagree with us, and we're supposed to love them and whatever. But that's what's so interesting to me is that when we're talking about this kind of stuff, how people wanted to cancel you or cancel me, or tons of people that I've had on this program. They just said like, we're going to crush that person like a bug. We do not want them to have a voice. Yeah. So they took this, the Eric Metaxas show was on YouTube. We had a huge following, and it was completely wiped out because I had Naomi Wolf on to talk about the vaccine.
Love Naomi Wolf. I've had her on my show before,
of course,
too.
She's been on the show many times. But just the idea that we had a conversation about vaccine mandates, not even the vaccine, about the mandates, and they were like, strike three. And you thought, okay, who would do that? Would nice people like totally shut down a show because we had a conversation?
No, and also nice people shouldn't hate you for having a different opinion. But this is a media invention, and media keeps doing this and keeps influencing people this way. Like, for instance, So like if you take something like gender reassignment surgery for kids, say you think that's a bad idea, like you don't think 12-year-olds should have gender reassignment surgery. I personally think that's a bad idea. I don't think kids are ready to make that kind of permanent decision about something like that.
Because they're not.
At that age. That's my opinion. But then somebody would say, oh, that means you are intolerant of gay and trans people, and that is not true. That's conflating things that are not true.
Well, but
just like it's happening now. It's happening with Israel Palestine right now too. The same thing in a different thing. If you think, the Israel's response to what they're doing to Gaza right now is not right or not what they should be doing, that means you're pro Hamas and that you hate Jewish people, and those things don't mean the same thing. You might think, hey, I don't think that's the right way to respond.
Right.
That doesn't mean you hate Jewish people. I don't think kids should have gender reassignment surgery. It doesn't mean you hate gay people. It's just, but that's what the media does. They go, this means this,
right.
And then you should hate this.
I mean,
it's all very black and white and
some
extreme.
Ways,
there's no room for nuance.
In some ways, it's not necessarily even the media, it's social media. It's
right.
Really what you're talking about is a mob mentality.
It's mob mentality without nuance, and I see both sides doing it. It's like, why are you doing that? Like, we are sensitive beings that can think deeply about things. These are complicated situations that require a lot of nuanced conversation, and it's not this black and white thing. Well, okay, you know what I mean? It's crazy.
Well, it's so interesting because in our lifetimes, we haven't seen this. And so suddenly a few years ago, talking about the election, I just saw clearly, I said, wait a second, this looks fishy.
It's fishy to say the least.
Even if I'm wrong,
right?
You're not going to tell me I can't talk about it.
And you can't
this
say
is
it looks
America.
fishy. You can't say it looks fishy.
But they did say that
Biden got more votes than Obama in his heyday by a lot. That guy, that looks fishy.
But you know what?
I'm sorry. If you, does that make me crazy because that looks fishy?
But I want to tell you, this is to me the worst part of it in a way, right?
Right.
Is what this kind of stuff has done is it has made people cynical. In other words,
there
are people who say the election was stolen, whatever, who cares? And you think, who cares? How emotionally dead are you that you don't care that the greatest nation in the history of the world that has freedom, where every person is supposed to have a voice. It's this beautiful idea, and you don't even care if some people just said, well, not this time. Trump is Hitler, and we're going to do whatever it takes. And you think, well, no, that's not really. That's up to the American voter to decide. And they said, well, we no longer trust the American voter. We don't care.
It's wild. So do you still like Trump, right?
Do I still like Trump?
Or should we not talk about that right now?
I love Trump. I think he's amazing.
Does his vaccine stance bum you out?
Well, look, just because I would vote for somebody or like somebody doesn't mean I agree with them on everything. And there is zero doubt that on that issue I would disagree. I don't know where he stands on that now. In other words, because a lot of his base, I think, has given him a ton of pushback so that he's not the kind of guy to easily say, vaccine. I made it wrong. I got it wrong.
It's a beautiful vaccine. We did a beautiful job with that.
Yeah. No, listen, I almost find it funny because he doesn't seem capable of saying I got that wrong, which he should. Obviously, he should. But no, I think that, I've said this before, but I think, listen, people can think what they want, but I do think it's true that Trump is a very different person than he was in 2016. In other words, the stuff that has happened, he was very naive. He came in okay, I was elected president, now I get to, and it's kind of like when you think of Lincoln, he wanted people that opposed him politically to be in his cabinet because he thought, I want to get along with everybody. I don't want to. So Trump did that, and he invited in naively some people who
Fauci the
were
snake.
gunning for. Yeah, well, Fauci's just one of the worst examples, but there's many examples of people that he just said come on in and we can all reason together, and he didn't know that they were not there to reason together. They were there to take him out. And so I think he's been so relentlessly attacked that I think he's kind of awake to this stuff in a way that he was not at all.
Let's hope so.
Yeah, well, we'll see. But that's my sense. But it's just, it's interesting because we were talking about the vaccine, you're talking about election fraud. Trump is another one of those triggers for people that they can't have a conversation. They just go crazy.
Yeah, it's nuts.
And I'm not interested in like arguing with somebody
Again,
like
it's
that.
a media invention. You know, it's the media. We're finding out how susceptible humanity is to propaganda in ways that I don't think we could have fathomed. There's a story of like Russian people coming over here and going like, "Oh yeah, like your propaganda is so much better in America than in Russia."
Yeah.
And the guy goes like, "Oh well." Wait a minute, Russia's famous for propaganda. It's like, yeah, the difference is in Russia, we all know it's propaganda.
Wow.
Right? And
We gotta go to a break. We'll be right back. I'm talking to Joseph Arthur, singer, songwriter, radio host. We'll be right back. A number of years ago, Phil Keaggy was
yeah,
like
Phil
this
Keaggy,
amazing,
Ohio's own.
amazing Christian
Incredible.
musician, right?
Yeah.
And so he was like, praised in the Christian music world. And then he wrote then he did
Instrumental.
an instrumental album, Master
Yeah.
Musician. So the religious people were kind of like, well,
Wait a minute.
is it a Christian album?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't have Christian lyrics. And you think, like these are questions that are,
Yeah.
is it a Christian tree? Is it a Christian bird? Is it a Christian glass of water? Did Christians make this desk?
Yeah.
It was the wood harvested by Christians. Like it just becomes so preposterous and so religious.
Yeah.
And I think we need to,
I
push
like-
back against that.
Stories about Paul, right? In the Bible, Paul.
Yeah.
Isn't that the
I've heard of Paul.
Have
I
you
believe
heard
he
of
was an
him?
apostle. I believe he wrote most of the New Testament.
And
yeah.
he struggled with sin and everything. These things I don't want to do, I keep doing, and the things I do want to do, I don't do. And it's like he's very relatable, and just like also just his life with like being sort of, beaten and just chased after and just tormented, and he learned how to live a life in peace, even as life was coming down at him all the time. I find him like so inspiring because
gosh.
because he is one of us, and yet he was heroic within being very human.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard anybody put it that way recently, but that is totally true.
Right.
But because I think sometimes, we have this temptation to turn our heroes into superheroes and
Right.
to forget
That they're-
that even Jesus, like Jesus did not, he was fully human while he was here. So people
Right.
think like, well, he didn't really suffer, he was God. Like, no, he did. So Paul,
do you think Jesus is God or the Son of God?
yes, I do.
Both.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Right.
It's-
So
well, he's definitely-
you believe in the Trinity?
Oh my goodness!
Yes.
I think that's pretty basic.
Right.
We don't even allow Unitarians in the studio.
Okay.
No, it's interesting because that I didn't expect to have a theological discussion.
Well, we don't
It's
have
obvious.
to.
I just thought we were going to do
We can
Bee
just-
Gees covers.
We can do Bee Gees cover. We can go back to Bee Gees.
I thought no. You know what? You wrote a song.
I'm just
speaking
curious.
about the old.
I'm a student of this, and I don't have
Yeah.
like strict beliefs on.
Yeah.
I do believe Jesus is the way. I
Yeah.
believe He died for me and
Yeah.
rose.
Yeah.
I
Then
think,
whether you believe in the Trinity or don't, you do. That's what's interesting. Like a lot of
Okay.
times people, it's kind of an Enlightenment rationalist thing. Like, since the 17th century, it's all got to be about, I believe this and this and this and this. And
But-
there are people who know Jesus personally, but they never heard of the concept of the atonement. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean that they're going to hell.
Right.
But there's some people who almost would say, well, no, you got to know
or
about
there's
it.
people that are studied that maybe don't have Him in their heart too.
Boom.
Like, and that's the point of your book too. But like when He says things like "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do," if He's also the Father, why doesn't He just say, "I forgive y'all"? Or like,
Yeah, well, that's- I mean,
or
look,
or like
there's
when
a
He
word
goes
for that.
off, or when He goes off to pray, who's
Yeah.
He praying to? Like,
no, there's
like,
a
so
word
that's
for
why I'm
that.
saying there are things where it goes like
There's
maybe-
the word
oh.
is mystery, and a lot of people are uncomfortable with mystery.
Right.
There are things that there is no doubt that you say, well,
Yeah.
there's a conundrum or a paradox, but there's some people that say, no, I have to know. Everything has to be like spelled out,
Right.
clear as a bell. Otherwise, it's of the devil. It's like, well, no, there's
Or-
room for mystery.
Or also He says, the things I do, you will do greater.
Yeah.
So was He lying about that? Because if He's God, there's no way we're doing greater.
Well, no.
than God.
He was.
You know
I
what
think
mean?
in that
Like-
in that case, he was talking about Jesus. But what he was trying to say is that, look, I am. While He was among us,
Right.
He was a human being, fully human,
Right.
empowered by the Holy Spirit. And so
Right.
when he ascends into heaven and sends down the Holy Spirit to live inside us, it means every single one of us
Yeah.
is empowered as he was
Yeah,
empowered.
he will be born again within us.
Which is an amazing thing. So people don't,
But-
when people say Jesus had the power to, heal the sick or raise the dead, God has given us, by the power of the Holy Spirit,
Yeah.
the ability to do those things as well.
I think some people though will say he was God, and again, like you say, like it brings up back to Paul, like how he's like earthbound, like
Yeah.
us, right? And so, but when people say like Jesus is this, is God, so therefore I can't live up to that.
But when-
I'm a
no, but
human.
when he was here-
so if you think of him as your brother, and that you can also achieve that,
Right.
it means you won't justify your own sinful nature.
But that's the whole reason he came to earth, right?
Right.
He shed his glory. He left his glory in heaven. He didn't come here as like the Jesus of Revelation, or when we go to heaven and we're in the presence of Jesus,
Right.
like that's Jesus, fully God. But when he came here, he on purpose was a human being who would feel pain